And it leads us to a framework that I've developed that helps us think through the content optimization attributes we might want to think about as part of an overall marketing strategy. So it starts where I believe all content should begin, which is optimizing for the human, our audience. And the first thing is to start with intent. Now, of course, the key with intent is understanding our audience and what they're really looking for when they consume our content. The North Star of this is, quite frankly, understanding our humans, our audience's intent, better than they might even understand it. When the question is, how much does Y product cost? We should ideally know whether or not the best answer is an article talking through the various attributes that affect the cost of a product, or quite simply, a price list, or both. And without technology, tricks, or data, the goal should be to understand all of the intentions of our audience and make it easy for them to actually find those things. This is truly what is at the heart of a great search engine optimization strategy. It's not just creating content that will rank for a particular search word. If you think about the Jefferson Airplane example, that's exactly what they did. Basically, whatever hack keyword strategy they could come up with to help them rank was what was going to get them to the front page. But who knows what happens when they got there? Today, understanding how the keyword or key phrase matches the intent for the searcher, that's what will take researchers and searchers to something that matches the intention of their search. And that brings us to the second optimization question, which is authority. Now, remember our librarian that we talked about and all those questions they were being asked to answer? Think about that for a moment. What were the callers expecting? They called a library and asked, should I write a thank you note after I attend a New Year's Eve party? Who did they think was answering that question? A librarian, of course, but it could have been very easily a librarian like me who, well, let's just say, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that question is. But the librarian doesn't say that. They are the keepers of information, and so they might look it up or they might make it up. Something that has to have some authority. So when we develop our content, no matter if we're educating, inspiring, entertaining, or simply providing directions, authority matters. This means details matter, depth matters. Surface level content that never provides access to details will fare less well than those that basically provide and claim and attain authoritative status. Now the key here is not just one piece of content, but it's your entire corpus of content and how it relates to one another. So how are you linking, attaching, serving relevant details to more in-depth content to everything you post so that it's easy to get that authoritative answer and that the consumer need not go anywhere else to get it? That leads us to what I call internal context. In a word, meaning. What does this stuff mean? Now, this might be your point of view on the world. It might be providing the unique take or approach to solving a particular problem. It might be the information you choose to provide in proximity to each other. Having a clear, consistent, and differentiated point of view and or meaning to your content is what can provide the ability for it to stand out when people are searching for those answers. Making decisions of how to display that meaning, that context, can also help you create deeper engagement with anyone who does answer it. This is a familiar concept to me. It's what I call the settle the bar bet problem. When you simply answer a question, someone at a bar says, "What's the answer to that question?" And then they pull out their mobile phone and they search and they find your answer and they go, yeah, that's it. And then they stick it in their pocket. Basically, they found what they needed and they move on. You want them to get the answer, but also be so intrigued that they ask their friend for a moment as they also start reading aloud. Did you know that? Did you know that this? Did you know that this is? Maybe they even bookmark it for future reading because it has engaged them with the context, the meaning, the deeper meaning of the way that you answered that question. Then we can cross the threshold into optimizing not for the human, but for the machine. Our digital librarian, if you will, our cyber Callimachus. We start with external context. This is where we want to create technology and automated solutions to optimize our content for conditional contexts. For example, How are we presenting our content, our answers, in a mobile versus desktop environment? Perhaps, and this is truly a plea from a consumer, maybe we'll decide that pop-ups won't be in the mobile version of our site. Please, please let that happen. That's just a really big wish of mine. Anyway, asking ourselves how we're using location, buying history, content consumption, device type, first-party data that we're gathering to provide different contextual displays of our content. That goes into that external context. And this goes beyond just the technological aspects, but using this insight, we can glean from the technology, we can help manually decide the kind of content to put into other channels like social media or those vertical sites or other interfaces where we don't control how that content will be displayed. And that brings us to the next one, which I think I describe as described. This is where we become our own librarians and we start creating content that describes our content to help the machines categorize, measure, personalize, activate, measure the content for that optimal presentation. Easy way to think about this is in three very commonly used categories. Descriptive metadata. That's a fancy way to say basically we're creating content that simply describes our content against categories, terms that can help our business strategy understand where it is better. Items here might be the audience persona that you create your content for, the buyer's journey phase that this particular piece of content is for, the category of products it supports, even the author of the content. Anything we want to think about that describes the content in terms of categories we'd like to track, look at, see, and basically measure. Then there's administrative metadata. Now, this is not something that's really related to the consumption of content, but how the content is managed. Things like publish date, or maybe even more importantly, expiration date for rights management of that image that you no longer will have the right to use anymore. Legal or compliance categorization, anything that helps the administration of that content be easier. And then there's finally what we call structural metadata. This is where the relationships of that content might be connected to each other. This is what helps one piece of content relate to another, a bridge, if you will. This might be a set of data that relates to one piece of content to another piece of content. And so if you have if you like this, you might like that kind of association. Or it might even be how to relate content pieces to another format. For example, you might have a piece of content from a book, let's say. But when it gets displayed digitally in a web browser, it's out of context, obviously, from the book. So you might assign it structural metadata such as page number or chapter number, that sort of thing. So it becomes easier for the consumer to relate it, the print versus the digital version of that particular book. Basically, the descriptions of content can be more content than the content itself. In some instances, when we were doing metadata strategies for some businesses, we would have 3 times as much descriptive meta content as the content itself. And then finally, that brings us to the purely technical attributes of content optimization, and which we call, well, funnily enough, the technical. Here we want to optimize content for the technologies that will help it get it in front of our audiences. We want to optimize our websites to be fast so that they're responsive to search engines. We want to optimize our mobile technology so that they're responsive to different interfaces that may come up from different kinds of devices. We want to block our content out into atomic structures to use CMS technologies to templatize these blocks of content, such as a standard brand language or product descriptions or legal footers or other things so that they're reusable and automated so that only needs to be updated in one place. We want to use that metadata to be always present, always in the next best presentation of content to a consumer. And there are others, of course. This basically scratches the surface. But hopefully, as you can see, this model can start to help you organize your thoughts as you start thinking through your content strategy and how you optimize your content to be always delivering the best experience. And if it seems, well, overwhelming, just start with optimizing for humans first. And just think of it like this. If we understand our audiences and what they're really looking for, we can optimize our content for findability. And once they find us, If we can create in-depth, valuable, informative, engaging content with authority, we can truly bring out the meaning of our content and drive better internal context. And then we can start using that basis to start using technology to optimize for external conditional contexts, such as mobile, search, social, etc. And then we can start taking care to describe our content so that machines can understand what we want those machines to do with it. And we can use technical solutions to present that content in the most optimal, next best fashion. Put very simply, today, we are Callimachus. We are not only the poets, we are not only the storytellers, but we are the librarians. We are here to provide the best stories, but also optimize how easily they are to be found and consumed by the right person in their time. And well, that's the future of content and content optimization. It's what it looks like. It looks exactly like what Callimachus found in the Library of Alexandria. We can create amazing stories and be the poets of our century. But if we don't make it easy to find, consume, and value, it won't matter. We have to organize and optimize our content, our answers to all those questions our audience might have. Organizing and optimizing is the act of building our content creator superpower, so that when our content must lift the weight of the entire business, we never get tired. Until I see you next month, remember, it's your story to tell. Tell it well.